Today on Making Maverick Moves, we're talking with Katie Rucker of Mackenzie Corp, a true futurist. She challenges assumptions, flips scarcity into possibility, and shows us how to step boldly into the infinite. Katie proves that the ultimate Maverick move isn't predicting what's next. It's imagining what could be and daring to make it real. Let's begin making Maverick moves. My name is Gina L. Osborne, and I'm an Army veteran. I spent 6 years during the end of the Cold War as a counterintelligence agent. I was appointed as an FBI agent, and during my 22-year career, worked everything from Asian organized crime to terrorism. I became the assistant special agent in charge of cyber and computer forensics. And then I came out of retirement and spent 2 years as the safety and security officer at LA Metro. Now I'm here to help you make your Maverick move. Welcome to the show, Katie.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be here today.
Well, I'm excited to have you because Mavericks, and that's what the show is all about, we love innovative leadership. And the reason why I wanted to have you on the show is because of your innovative leadership. And at your company, Mackenzie Corp, you're encouraging leaders to think like futurists. So what does that look like?
So first of all, if anybody tells you that there's this like magic crystal ball out there and they're going to sell you the answers, like what's coming next, like run to like the opposite direction, because there isn't a way to predict the future. I mean, that's the biggest thing. But for us, and what it really means like to me is just helping to inspire people to think differently and think about with futures thinking. There's always an S at the end of futures, and that's not a typo. It's because we truly believe that there's infinite possibilities that's out there. And so I think a lot of leaders can get stuck in a reactive mode and that they are like, I'm going from here to here. And then if things don't go right, that's then where rigidity comes in, and just the sense of anxiety and overwhelmed sometimes about like, how are we going to move forward? But if we can actually learn to release, I always kind of say like, open our hands a little bit more and think about the infinite possibilities that can be there, it's going to open us up to different ideas and allow for more curiosity and imagination and proactive approach to where we're going versus reactive approach. So it's just all about trying to inspire people to have a little bit more sense of agency over where they're going.
That reactive approach is really a problem, especially in the world that we live in. And I always say that the killer of innovation is the status quo. So how do you recommend that leaders get out of that reactive mode?
I think we are in this society and this narrative that is speed and efficiency. I mean, even just thinking about with adding in AI and adding in all this stuff, everything is at our fingertips and we can get things so fast. I mean, you can ask me a question right now, I can pick up my phone, I'd have the answer. And if we actually can first start to learn to just pause, even if it's for 5 minutes, 30 seconds before we respond, that's going to help us pause, take a deep breath, and then see if there could potentially be some other scenarios or other answers to what it is that you're responding to. If you stop and think a little bit about like an arrow, if you're doing like bow and arrow, the arrow actually has to go backwards before it can propel forward. And a lot of times we're just trying to go forward from where we are. And so I think one is just learning the art of pausing, I think is a really big step that people can do.
And what I've heard you say is live, strategize, lead based on what's possible rather than what's probable or what's happening now. And I think that's the definition of having vision, is that you're leading as if the reality, your reality, the reality you want to build is happening right now.
If you actually can do some exercises and say, but what happens if we end up going this way? And then saying like really having some time and doing some strategic planning around if that future happened to us, how would we as an organization, how would I as a person, how would I support my company, my team, my family, my this, my that? 9 times out of 10, that other direction may not actually happen. But when something maybe in between your preferred future and maybe like the one you really don't want happens, you're like, oh, that's not so bad. You're a lot more resilient because you actually have like learned I can live in all these different potential scenarios. So some of it is taking time, again, leaning into our imagination, suspending disbelief, the times that you want to say that could never happen. That's when you actually want to force yourself to pause and say, but what if it did? And what would we actually do if that happened? So as leaders, we have to, again, slow down a little bit and create space to allow our teams to play around in some of those scenarios, knowing that, again, 9 times out of 10, they may never happen. But what you're doing is teaching your team that you can be adaptive in whatever is going to come tomorrow. And so it's a practice for sure.
So people who listen to this show, they are looking to make their Maverick move. But even the boldest leaders, sometimes, like you said, they do feel stuck. So how does this futurist thinking kind of allow them to get out? Maybe you can talk a little bit about what recommendations do you have for the people who are feeling stuck?
One, I mean, I just believe I would say go on a curiosity challenge and what would that even mean? So, I mean, just a few quick little tips to kind of say where would I say get started? I mean, I believe that if we could show up for a week straight and lean into curiosity and through conversations, have conversations with people that you never have talked to before. Ask them how they got to where they are. There's some sort of spark about it. I mean, I think you and I feel like we just connected through something. I was like, I don't know. I feel like we're supposed to meet. Just go and have things like that. Go and talk to people without even an objective. It's just to say, I was inspired by XYZ and I'd love to learn more about your story. I think the more that we can have conversations where we can get outside of our own bubble, we're going to start thinking differently. We have to shake up the status quo. We have to have different kinds of ways of thinking. The other tip that I give people all the time on how we can start thinking like a futurist in 5 minutes a day. When you listen to something or read something, so if you're driving home today and you're listening to a podcast or you're listening to something and you're like, yes, this resonates, everything. I'm all in. Pause for a minute and say, but what if the opposite was true? What if this actually wasn't the best piece of advice, but the worst piece of advice I could have? What would happen in my life this way? Just start questioning things, not in a way to be in a bad way. It's more through the curiosity. It's starting to get our brains to start saying, what else could be true? Or I hadn't thought about it that way. How do we start shaking up the way that we think about things? And it has to be again, taking control of our future is a proactive approach. And so we have to proactively challenge the way that we think about things today. So it's also about seeking out information sources that are outside of your algorithm. I mean, we all know what's happening with our data sources and media today. So you should go to the opposite, of where you're at and then say, if 50% of America thinks that this is great, what if I actually just spent 5 minutes thinking, how could this positively impact me? Where normally I would be, that's wrong, that's negative, or this is amazing. Then say, what if the opposite was true? We have to start challenging ourselves. And I think that if we could do these kinds of curiosity challenges, we'll start to shift the way we're thinking and we can start to see different solutions outside of what we're already thinking. And it'll start to gets the wheels moving.
Mm-hmm. And with a country so divided, and I don't like to go into politics.
That's okay.
But when you think about this divide and you think how people have taken sides, we lose a lot of our inspiration and our motivation when it's either black or white, right? So how do we hold on to that more than 5 minutes a day? How do we pass that along to the people we work with our families? Because really it's that excitement that's really going to bring the two sides together.
Once a month, I'm meeting right now. There's 6 of us. So 3 people on one side politically and 3 people on another side. And we spend 3.5 hours once a month just chatting and saying all the things that we kind of want to be able to say that we maybe all are saying in our own little circles, but actually having thoughtful, curious conversations. And one of the questions from the facilitator, because they are facilitated sessions, I'm in my 4th month right now with this group, is tell me about your lived experience and how it's impacted your political views. But I think that question also is, if we're leading through any of these kinds of questions, somebody can come into, or we have these divides, and then I have my feelings, you have your feelings. But being able to actually understand more about your lived experience is going to help me, one, connect back with you as a human, not as like a this or this. It's how do we get back to remembering that we're all people doing our best every single day, right? We're all waking up when the sun comes up and we're all doing the best we can. Most of the time, we have very similar shared values. Most of the time, we all want the same thing, maybe different approaches on how we want to be able to do it. So again, I think it comes down to personal responsibility and accountability. We can create a ripple out there, but we have to start with ourselves first. And so the biggest challenge I think I would have for people is, how are you showing up every day, leaning in with that curiosity and this mindset of being able to say, if I believe that there's possibility for us to be able to reimagine how we are, if we're thinking on the political side of it, or reimagine our health system, or reimagine our education system, what conversations am I having that is opening me up to different ideas, different perspectives, challenging my own narratives and assumptions? And the more that we can be doing it individually, we can then start modeling it for other people, and then we can inspire other people to do it. So I think that's the biggest thing, is then being able to also collect different perspectives, and then being able to say, I don't know 100% about this, but I'd love to go like meet a couple different people who might know a little bit more about it and help me before I say this is the definitive answer. I think the biggest thing around foresight and futures thinking is about, there's like a little saying that my mentor said, you can't connect the dots until you collect the dots. And so think about like the books we used to have when we were kids, the little dot, dot, dot books. And if you had 10 dots, then you had a certain kind of picture. But if you had the page that had like 200 dots on it, the picture is so much more intricate. So if we could actually go out and connect or collect more and more information from diverse perspectives, we're going to be able to paint a picture that's going to be more broad and potentially inclusive and from different perspectives and varieties.
We have to ask ourselves, how often do we feel joy in our life? And thinking about the possibilities, thinking about winning the $1.8 billion lottery ticket, that's where you go back to that childlike feeling where everything is possible.
The biggest thing is if we want agency over our lives, we have to also acknowledge that we're personally accountable for having to take the efforts. And so we are personally accountable for the joy that we want in our lives. And so if we are seeing a vision of the future that we feel stuck and we're frustrated and we're this and we're this, we do have to at some point pause and look in the mirror and say, am I brave enough, courageous enough to actually do something? We don't have to like do everything at one point, right? Hopefully we all got a long runway here, but am I brave enough to do one thing? And it might be super uncomfortable because I have to start somewhere new, but there is always, I believe, a way to shift where you're going in your future and really start doing it. But we are responsible for that. And if we sit there and say, but this is how it is, this is the hand I was dealt, this is this. And I get that. And there's a lot of circumstances. So I'm speaking from a place of privilege with that. And I acknowledge that. But I also think that there's a lot of people who are like, I'm going to wait till I'm retired and then I can do all this stuff. But how many years are they going to be sad and frustrated? But that's the future that they're choosing to actually have. They are choosing that path instead of being brave and courageous to say, this is actually my preferred future, and I'm going to do something to start pulling myself there. So it comes down to agency. And that's where I'm saying, I think for me, I'm excited to inspire people to think differently, because it's not just about the leadership, because those leaders have to also feel like that's the path that they want to be on. Because if they're feeling like they're stuck, I mean, a bunch of us could go, we made our way up the ladder and we're up there at the top, and you're like, you look down, you're like, this was never the ladder I meant to be on. I meant to be on this ladder over here. And that's hard to take that like step and acknowledgement. But we either, again, we're living a future, whether it's someone else's directed future or our own. And I personally love the idea of being able to pull myself towards the one that I want.
Mm-hmm. So what do Maverick moves look like in the future?
Ooh, that's a good one. I don't know. Right now, when I envision kind of like the future that I see and like would love to do, I actually think that in the next 5-10 years, I actually see some of it as this more holding space for these more like collaborative conversations and more grounding back to a simpler time, right? So we're on this like pendulum where we are like going. And so there could be some people, if you ask them their vision of the future, it's going to be more speed, more efficiency, more. My heart and soul is craving slower. But I think that in that slowness is where we're going to be able to reimagine how we like move forward. So I actually think the Maverick moves in my mind are actually the brave souls who are open and willing to slow down and hold space for what wants to emerge, which may be different than like the concept that some people think. Like when I originally think about Maverick moves, I'm like, those are the ones who are like getting in there and they're like, doing these big, huge, bold things. But I actually think a little bit of slowness might be bolder right now than actually more speed, because it's the opposite of what we're doing right now.
Love that. Well, on that note, I would like to thank you, Katie, for being on the show.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for being here and just being for a champion for different ways of leading and just being an inspiration to challenge people to push the envelope, because I think that's something that we do need in the future as leaders, but even more so as just people and humans. And so I just want to say thank you for also like the contributions that you're making to our community and for everyone who's listening to your stories that you're telling there for sure.
Making Maverick Moves is hosted by Gina L. Osborne and was edited, produced, and sound engineered by Sunny Side Up Marketing. Our theme music, epic trailer, and violin life are courtesy of Descript Stock Media. This episode is copyrighted as of 2025 by Gina L. Osborne and Associates. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to Making Maverick Moves on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.